recording on the mixer in 5, 4, 3.
Welcome to the SaveOne podcast, where we share testimonials of overcoming inner turmoil and tackle the tough topic of common mental health struggles. Our goal is to create a community of believers who support each other through camaraderie, understanding, and love by revealing the secrets we so frequently try to hide from others. You are never alone. What's going on, everybody? We got me and Thomas in here today. We got Daniel Anderson, our producer, who's going to definitely be chiming in on today, I got a feeling. No guest today, but we're going to kind of have a little bit different podcast. We're going to sit here and just talk about some stuff. We're going to kind of wing it today a little bit. We got a couple ideas of some topics, but start off, Thomas, how's the week been, man?
Man, it's been great. It's been very eventful. I got to go to a worship in the woods last night. That was so powerful.
Yeah.
I never feel as connected with the Holy Spirit as I do when I'm worshiping, man. Like there's no way to compare that, to anything else in my life than, just giving glory to the Lord and, just praising him with everything you got, But that was a blast last night.
That was with Ryan Watson?
Yeah, out there with Ryan Watson. I believe he's coming on our podcast, actually. A little plug for Watson Duck Calls. What's up?
June 21st, Ryan Watson will be on here.
Yeah.
So he and I grew up together, know him and Sarah really well. They got Watson Photography, and then he's finally getting back into doing his duck calls. Used to be a police officer with me, grew up together. It's going to be he's got a really good story.
Man, he's a great
We'll leave it at that.
He's a great human being, he is.
Yeah.
He's a good guy. And he can jam, too. He's got some skills.
He can play the heck out of a guitar and sing, that's for sure. So, Well, good. Well, mine's been a chaotic week of work.
I was going to ask how your week went.
I'm a little tired right now. Thank God for Monster Energy, whoever created that. That's kind of where I'm at the moment.
I think it's Pablo Escobar, I believe, is who created. I might be wrong on that. I don't know.
Well, anything else on your mind?
Man,
anything you want to kick it off with?
I
got a couple ideas.
Man, the Lord's been using me lately. Just because of this podcast, people have been reaching out to me, and just trying to find some light in the darkness, man. And I just feel so humbled, because I'm just, as a disclaimer, you guys, I'm nobody to listen to. Like, if anything, learn from my mistakes. Is what I suggest people do from the things that I say, because I am no clinical psychologist. All I know is what the Lord has done in my life and what he can do in yours for sure. If he can do it for me, for this dude, he can definitely do it for you. But it's just been humbling to be a part of this and to know what the Lord's going to do from it. It's inspiring for sure.
Cool. Well, let's jump in, I guess, to kind of some random discussion. There's a couple of things been on my mind this week. And I apologize. I'm super tired. I'm running on 2 hours of sleep right now. So it was kind of a eventful night for me. But two things I've been looking at this week, judgment and shame, are kind of the two things that have been on my heart a lot this week. With the book I'm reading, with some stuff we did in therapy, that's kind of what I'm going on right now. I've had kind of a week of highs and lows. Have a good day and then kind of a bad day. A lot of stuff rush in. Kind of seems to be the everyday thing. But
what does that look like? I'm curious. Like, I've actually talked to a therapist lately about starting some therapy, and I was wondering, what does that entail? Like, whenever you start to go over something like that, like, what does that look like? What are the exercises that you go through?
Yeah, so great question. So for me, and kind of a little hint of another episode we got coming up, 1st of June, we got an episode coming up that's going to tackle what is therapy. I actually have a therapist coming on here, and we're going to talk a lot about, what therapy looks like, some of the myths of it and what some of the exact different techniques are for different people. So some of the stuff I go through, that I know Daniel probably have an opinion on. One of them is internal family systems. We've we've done some work with that, which so people who aren't familiar with it, it is the most awkward. It is weird at first, because we all, and Daniel has more experience with this than I do, but we all have all these different voices in our head.
Oh yeah.
And so those are essentially different personalities. And parts, yeah. I was about to correct myself. Parts, because those parts of us are formed throughout life and they serve a purpose in us. You kind of have that caring person in you. You have that dominant person in you that protects you, that defender. When you really dive into the internal family systems, if I'm not mistaken, they talk about firefighters and something else. Exiles. So for me, a lot of my personality, a lot of the way I've handled things throughout my life is, words to describe it are, aggressive, dominant, controlling, stuff like that. So one of the main parts of me that I had to tackle was this dominating big brother, protector, defender type person inside of me, that if you come at me with anything, I'm gonna be defensive about it, and it's rooted in I immediately feel judgment, I immediately feel shame. Those are kind of the two big things I've battled more than anything throughout my life. And with that, it comes out also as, think about like when you went to the military, the worst drill instructor you had, the meanest one, he's a pansy compared to that part of me, the way I talk to myself and the way I just beat myself up about everything. If I make a mistake, like, I'm the biggest POS. I dog cuss myself, essentially. And I don't let myself go with it. I don't give myself forgiveness. I don't give myself grace. And so one of the first things we did in therapy was have that part of me sit right there in that empty chair and have a discussion with that part of me and essentially let that part of me speak. Hear that part of my self's perspective, reasonings, and you're essentially, it sounds weird, but you are, one, letting that part of you speak, two, letting that part of you know that it's okay, and kind of rerouting how they help you through your situations. Like, you need that part of you who protects you and defends you and has that fight, but you don't need that part of you for every scenario, kind of thing.
Right.
And so it's kind of interesting. You literally sit there and have a conversation, and your therapist kind of helps walk you through that. Like I said, Daniel's got some experience with it. He's a little smarter than I am. He may have a little more a little more to input on it, a little more detail of the exact internal family systems. That's one thing, and then there's a couple others I'll tell you about.
Yeah, I'm no expert on it in any way, shape, or form, but what you said was pretty. You hit the nail on the head. Really, it's we are all comprised of multiple parts. There are exile parts, there are firefighter parts, there are protectors, there's all sorts of different parts, and these parts, like you said, are formed throughout our life, and they are there. They serve a purpose to protect us, make us feel loved, make us feel appreciated. So when they get activated, their number one job is to make you feel safe and protected no matter what. So throughout my whole using, I like you discussed, you know, I was super hateful towards myself, super like, oh my God, I can't believe you did that again, you fucking idiot, you fucking idiot. Like, that's all I would say to myself. And especially like throw drugs and alcohol into the mix too, and it's just compounded. So what the sitting down in my therapist's office, and what he did was he said, hey, all right, I want you to pick out random objects in my office, pick them up, physically pick them up and put them in the center of the room. And we're going to identify your parts, and we're going to be able to visualize what these parts are and what they do. And I felt like a complete child in preschool, like really, Russ, like he's like, yeah, just like, trust me. I was like, all right. So we did it, and we began to identify these different parts. And what all of that process did, I mean, I could go on and on and on, but to sum it all up and not detract from you guys' show, what it does was it allowed me to identify and truly begin to believe that I don't have any inherent bad parts. There's not any parts of me that are bad, only parts that are activated because they're trying to make me feel loved and appreciated and cared for. That's it. There are no bad parts. And so once I began to really believe that, I began to be able to have, like you discussed, have those parts sit in a table or sit in a chair. What my therapist described is, what we want to do is we want to get to a point where there's self, right? Here's self that's in charge of everything. Then here's all your parts down below. And the way I like to envision it is, here's self, I'm in charge of all of my parts. And then here's God behind me, kind of helping things out, kind of guiding me and, you know, helping me to make the right decision. So God is right behind me. I'm right here. Self is in front of all of my parts. And then here I got all my parts, all the guys that are activated and scared and freaked out. I have them, and I say, come on, let's sit down at a table. Let's sit down once a week. Let's have a conversation. Yeah. Let's discuss who's activated, who's having a hard time, and let's run to those guys with love and compassion instead of, I hate you, I can't believe you're doing this again, you fucking idiot. Yeah. Instead of that, I now can have a conversation with all those parts. And when you can have compassion and love for all of your parts, all of a sudden you can have compassion and love, true compassion and love with other people. For me, I was not able to have compassion and love with other people until I could forgive myself for being a piece of shit that I was when I was in active addiction and in my past.
Yeah. And essentially think about it as like, when you start out, you'll start noticing that some of those parts are out of balance, essentially. One, like for me, that dominating one is a little too activated. That's kind of, to be honest, so I'll tell you this real quick. So one of the exercises we did, it was pretty interesting. Over the weekend, my therapist had me draw a picture, which, thank God I threw it away because it is hard. Actually, I didn't throw it away, but I just won't show nobody. I'm not an artist. But essentially draw out what that part of me looked like that I was having such a problem with. And it was a very dominating figure. It was very kind of evil, kind of mean, if you can picture that. And all around it, I wrote out all the things that part of me says to me, which were, you're a piece of shit, you're a failure, you suck, you're not a good husband, you're not a good father, you know, you've made all these mistakes, who could love you? Just all these different things, all these mean things. And then on the next page, I drew that same picture, all the ways God sees me. And that's when it, like, kind of like Daniel was talking about, that's when you start realizing that, one, God loves you in a whole different way, sees you in a whole different way that is much better. So it was all those things of, you know, where this part of me is saying, you're a failure, you're a piece of shit, all this stuff. God's looking at me saying, you're my perfect son. I already died for you. You're forgiven for everything. You're a great father. You're a great husband. You have the potential to be this. You have the potential to be that. All these very positive, reaffirming things. And so for me, what internal family systems is doing is you're changing your mindset, you're changing your perspective of yourself, and you're replacing all of these negative things and giving yourself a better view of yourself. So that's one thing.
That sounds super powerful, man. That sounds like something I could definitely benefit from.
Yeah.
It is so obvious how those different parts and pieces of us shape our persona and who we become and who we carry around, as ourselves, because when we beat ourselves down, you can see it, when we love ourselves and we know that God loves us, it shows, They always say in our life group, when you've been hit by the grace train, it's obvious, when you get hit by a train, you're going to notice a difference, of, the way you look, your whole demeanor. Go in more detail about, what that second step was you were talking about.
So another thing that we do, and actually have a lot of this coming up. And first, let me say this. I'm going to tackle this a lot more whenever we talk more about what is therapy. But just like with that, you can imagine the key that I have found to therapy, I think it's the reason it's so hard for especially guys, especially type A guys, to go to therapy is, dude, whatever guards you have, drop them at the door, because you're gonna do things in therapy that sound absolutely crazy, and you're gonna have the same reaction Daniel had, same reaction I had, where you're just like, are you serious? We're about to do this right now. Be open-minded. So one of the other big things that we do is called EMDR. Do not get me to sit here and lie and tell you what EMDR stands for, because I forget. But essentially what you're doing there, and I will say this is difficult. This is not fun, to be truthful, is you're reliving events. And the way my therapist does it, there's some methods of tapping on yourself. So I'll literally show you. You're literally sitting there reliving a situation, a traumatic situation. For me, there are some we've dealt with from my career as a firefighter and in law enforcement, things I've seen and had to deal with that I didn't deal with that now we're dealing with. And then some things that I experienced in my past marriage and divorce and all that. But you're sitting there, and as you're living out, as you're talking in detail about the situation, you're slow tapping on my shoulders like this. And as you're talking about it, you got your eyes closed. It can be difficult to relive some of those memories. And so you're desensitizing. And then what you're doing next is you go back through that situation, but with a more positive perspective, and he'll kind of tell me to start fast tapping. And you're building up a positive reinforcement of the situation. So, for instance, I know a lot of first responders, military guys and girls deal with this. Say you're on a scene, say you're on a pretty bad call, and you beat yourself up for it after it. Could I have done anything different? Could my crew have done anything different? Did I do everything I could to save that person? Whether that's a vehicle accident where you're cutting somebody out and they die on you, you didn't get them out fast enough, a fire, a shooting, different stuff. Did you do enough? And that's kind of, to me, one of the biggest things that haunts a lot of first responders. Could I have done anything different? And so as I've worked through some calls that I've had through EMDR, is going through it and laying the scene out first, and then as we do the positive reinforcement, bringing to light and understanding that, okay, yeah, we did do everything. There's literally nothing else I could have done. I had a call one time with a guy that was actually on his way to pick up his tuxedo for his wedding, and died in a car wreck. I was trying to cut him out. I was inside the car. My captain was outside the car. Air Care had landed. They were waiting for me to get him out so that they could start sonogramming and all. And when I first got there, got in the car, he was alive. As I'm cutting him out, I watched him take his last breaths. He dies. And like, this one didn't bother me big time. I've actually never done EMDR with it, but it's one I'm okay with speaking on right here. It did kind of bother me. Like, I wondered, like, man, could I have Could I have gotten that door off quicker? Could I have rolled that dash quicker? Would it have made
course.
any difference?
Yeah.
You know, somebody could get hung up on that. Did I do enough? And if you got hung up on that, what it could do is block out the fact that when air care sonogrammed him on scene or ultrasound him on scene and all that, checked everything, man, like his spleen was split, his liver was split. He had so much internal bleeding that it wouldn't have mattered if I could have walked up and just pulled him out right then within 30 seconds. He still wouldn't have made it.
Mm-hmm.
So I use that as an example because if somebody had that type scene and they were really beating themselves up, did I do enough? Maybe what you've done is you've blocked out the fact that you did do everything you could and your actions would not have determined whether that person lived or died. But maybe you've blocked that out for years and you've held on to that call. Doing EMDR can walk you through and expose that back half of that I discussed where, yeah, you got him out, and then air care confirms that there's absolutely nothing we could have done. Does that kind of make sense of how that EMDR?
I can kind of see exactly how you're talking about how those other little parts and pieces can, talk to your, yourself or whatnot and bring you down. But I can also see how it's beneficial too, so I think that we remember traumatic things. One of the most important reasons is, to prevent that from happening in the future.
Absolutely.
And also to, correct any errors, so that is beneficial, the criticism of yourself, if you could have done better, because what if you could have, what if you did sleep on something, or, what if you, you could have made a better choice. Then it could be learning experiences, but like you said, when you let those things live inside your mind and, control, your emotions, then it's too far,
Yeah. And so therapy, so that that's two particular treatments that I've experienced that can be done in therapy. A lot of my other therapy experience is really just talking, talking to somebody and sharing stuff with him because there's no judgment. I don't have to go eat dinner with him tomorrow night and, be embarrassed about what I told him the day before. There's no shame. And so it's kind of, for me, it's my one person that I can out loud speak anything and everything that's going through my head, with full confidence that it's not going to get shared to anybody else. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the best thing about it. But then there are specific things. Started going through some the dialectic. I'm gonna screw that up. It's a workbook. I'm starting to go through. Another big thing, I actually have it with me today, that a book that I started reading about a week and a half ago. It's called The Inner Work. There's another book I'm about to start called The Inner Work of Relationships. So this is all about consciousness, and it's about understanding.
Who wrote that?
I don't know. It's not right here on. We'll have to get back to that. I'll let you know. But it's all about consciousness and about essentially coming to the understanding and the acceptance that other people's judgment, other people's reaction to you, the way you feel and see other people, how they react to you is a reflection, and what they do to you is a reflection of their own internal trauma and battles that they're experiencing.
Oh, for sure.
Essentially, what, the core concept of hurt people, happy people help people kind of deal. And that's evident. I try to only speak like from my personal experiences. When I was going through the police academy, I was one of the older ones in the class. I had the experience from the fire department. I could have been such a help to people, because it's kind of like if you've been to boot camp, if you've been to the fire service, fire academy, they're all similar. The mental games they play, the bull crap they come in and do to you in the middle of the night, like, what's coming to a degree. Instead, I was an asshole. Literally got called an asshole all the time, because while myself and like I had a couple guys in there that were military, Marines, Army, a couple things. For us, the mind games, the bull crap, it was funny because we've already been through it.
Yeah.
For the younger guys, man, I should have been more of a leader to them. Instead, I was super hard on them. Yeah. You know, if they messed up, I was hard on them. I'd cuss them out. You know, I'd call them out. I'd beat them up about it. And I bring that up because that's what I was doing in my own head. You know, I wasn't in the same place I am now. I didn't have the empathy. I didn't have the understanding. Looking back, man, some of these guys are in their early 20s, just turned 21. They've never experienced anything other than traditional education. They've never had to push themselves. They've never experienced that. And here I am, somebody that could have put my arm around them and still said, hey, this isn't good enough. You're not doing good enough. But I could have done it in a loving way. But because of my own internal battles that I was having, being the fact that, one, I was beating myself up. I mean, I think I said it before on here, like, I laughed at half the stuff the instructor said and did, because it was like a G-rated movie compared to what was going on in my head at my own self. Nobody in the academy knew that my wife had already told me she was thinking about divorcing me. And I was essentially trying to get through the academy to go home and fight for my family. And so I was moody. I just had a lot going on. The way that I treated them has nothing to do with the people that they were. They're wonderful people. Every negative thing that I did to them or said to them was a reflection of my own internal battles and fight that was going on in me.
I've definitely been guilty of it. You know, projecting your own insecurities on other people. You know, it's not hard to do. You know,
yeah.
And especially when you got that voice, you know, living rent free in your head, screaming every day. You know, I got that same drill sergeant in my head. You know, I think we all do. You know, that I tend to be way harder on myself than I should, and I think a lot of men do that. And it's like, again, you know, some of it's necessary. You know, some of it, you know, that's where God comes in, right?
Yep.
And I looked at the exact same thing that you're talking about with the different personalities, but I viewed it as lenses, you know, in my own, you know, thought processes. Is, you know, growing up as a man, learning different things throughout life or whatnot, and it was always a different lens I was looking at things through. If it was the voice of my father or the voice of, you know, my mother, what my mother would say, you know, what that drill sergeant would say. And also, I've noticed myself time and time again imagining what someone else's internal voice would be saying about me through them, if that makes sense. You know, not only, and almost reading through the lines and taking things as I shouldn't take them, because I'm actually projecting that insecurity that I assume they are projecting on me. You know, does that make sense?
100%. And so that's really the key. So like one of the things that I've had to change in my mind, and this came through therapy, and then, for instance, this book has helped me atone with this. I used to, in my mind, would constantly say, you know, Jeremy, you should have done better. Jeremy, you could have done better. Jeremy, you didn't do good enough. That person rejected you. That person judged you because you weren't good enough. Like, so, you know, good enough is a big statement that is kind of recurring in my journey of healing and changing myself and understanding myself better. Just this constant, you weren't good enough. Change that to, I did the best that I could at the time, knowing what I knew then and being in the mental state that I was then. And as I've changed that perspective, like I understand it's hard. I mean, I still beat myself up, but just knowing, obviously one of my most traumatic things, I'm semi-transparent with it on here, is my divorce. And a lot of stuff around feeling like, you know, I failed my ex-wife, I failed my kids and stuff like that. Well, yeah, I made a lot of mistakes. But what I've come to accept now and really embracing, and it's where I've started finding healing, is financial failure, stuff like that. I did the best that I could at that time. Now, today, hindsight being 2020, and going through 7 months of therapy and going through different things where I've healed myself, and I have a better way of looking at things, and I have a better understanding of people and why certain things are happening. Could I make a better choice now? Could I lead my ex-wife better now? Could I handle situations with my children better now? Could I handle situations when I was a lieutenant on the fire department the way I handled guys? Could I have handled things in the police academy differently? Yes. Now I could, because I've healed to the point that I am now. In 5 years, I'll be able to make even better decisions because I'm going to have more experience. I'm going to be closer to the Lord in 5 years. I'm going to have learned so much more in 5 years. So that's one of the biggest things that has given me some freedom around rejection and judgment, is just when I get to thinking about that, to stop myself and say, it's okay. You did the best that you could do at that time based on what you knew and were capable of. And that's the key. I mean, it's like I can think of mistakes I made as a firefighter. Well, I didn't make those same mistakes, 4 years later, after I had some experience.
Right.
Looking back, on my fire career, on my business career, on my marriage, on my kids, everything, I wish I wouldn't have been so hard on people, and I wish I would have had this perspective then. That would have been awesome, because, looking back, some of those firefighters that were under my command made the same mistakes I made, but I was super hard on them.
Yeah.
And that's crappy on me. But I did the best I could at the time with what I knew and what I had experienced and where I was in my own journey, as you hear a lot of us say. Does that make sense?
For sure. What's changed me personally, in the way that I go about my life, and it's molded the things that I do, in reactions and different encounters with people, and that is trying to focus. So when someone told me this, it really struck a chord. And to bring it back biblically, even we were actually talking about rejection today in church, and somebody had told me there's one of two ways that you can go about rejection, shame, and in the Bible, Peter denied Christ 3 times, right? He felt shame for that. In the same way, Judas betrayed Jesus, right?
Mm-hmm.
He felt shame too. But the difference is what they did. Peter brought it to Jesus, right? He repented for his. Judas could have done the same thing, right? And I think that's what's so important to realize, is that it's not what role we are, right? Because in my mind, and it's something I battled with and wrestled with the story of Judas, in my head, is like if Judas was in this position, was there any hope for him, in the beginning? Was it his destiny to, for his life to play out like it did, for him to betray Jesus or whatnot? And I feel like that heaven was on the table still for him. It was his choice, and the way that he handled the shame by suicide that changed the outcome for him in the end, right?
Yeah.
Peter denied Christ 3 times, and Jesus knew he would, right? Jesus knew Judas was going to betray him, but didn't kick him out of the circle, right? So we all have that. We all have that potential, to change things. It depends on how we go about it. Are we going to look at things like Peter did? Or are we going to look at things like Judas did? Are we going to be Judas or Peter? Are we going to live in that shame and let it engulf us, or are we going to bring it to God? And that has changed my outlook tremendously on trying to focus, not just living like Christ, but having that mindset, and changing my perception. That's what repentance is, right? Changing the way you think and changing that mindset. And it allows you to take grasps of those ideas and those thoughts whenever they do, invade our consciousness, to put them back where they belong.
Man, that's actually awesome, because I've never looked at it exactly like you just said. But earlier in the week, as I was going through some of this stuff and studying on it, you're exactly right. So before 8 months ago, my walk with Christ has been a roller coaster, mountaintops and valleys, but to the extreme. And the fact that, so my view of how I judged myself, that part of me that's so hard on me, that's also how I viewed God. So for years, throughout the last 15 years, if I was close to God, it was performance-based. Most of my relationships, friendships, and relationships with girls, and my marriage, I felt was very performance-based, based on what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong. If I'm not perfect, this person is not going to want to be my friend. If I'm not perfect, this girl is not going to want to be with me. If I'm not perfect, my wife's going to leave me, kind of deal. And so I had that same view with God. So to put that into practical sense, if I sinned, look it back, I would literally be like a little kid trying to hide.
Yeah.
I wouldn't pray. I wouldn't read. I wouldn't go to church. I literally had the most ignorant view of a relationship with Christ. And the fact that I used to actually say, you either need to be a Christian or a sinner. How stupid is that? And some of that also comes up. I'm about to tick some people off, but it's okay. I grew up in the Church of Christ. And we've talked about this a lot in therapy. There were some great people at my church. Some of y'all watch this, don't take offense to this. But if you know anything about Church of Christ, it can be judgmental. You don't see a lot of people go up to the invitation song in a Church of Christ church. I grew up in it. You don't wear blue jeans to church.
Huh.
You don't talk about your problems. That not all Church of Christ are like this, full disclosure, but the one I grew up in, I felt judgment. I felt like I didn't grow up in a church where I saw and witnessed people being broken and people being vulnerable and transparent with their struggles. I grew up in a church where you come in on Sunday, you're dressed in your best clothes, you sing a cappella, you listen to the sermon, and then you leave and you go to lunch. And if anybody was visiting the church that walked in blue jeans, they probably got looked at weird. If anybody went up front, everybody's wondering, oh, what are they struggling with? Yeah. I did not get to witness growing up the brokenness of people and the grace of God. Like I said, if you take offense to that, message me, we can talk about it. But that's what I took with me. That's why when I was a teenager, I had no desire to walk in a church. I wanted to get drunk, get high, and go party. So I took that into my 20s, and into my 30s, I kept that mentality of you either got to be this perfect Christian or you got to be a sinner. One or the other. Yep. Take a pick.
Oh, I'm in the same boat, man. Like for the longest time, I thought that, if you're Christian, you can't do this. In order to be Christian, you have to do this. It was like a long laundry list in my mind of pretty much excuses of why I could never be a Christian, and it kept me from even entertaining the idea of considering, even being a Christian. And I think that turns a lot of people off, but what they don't realize is that when you become Christian, those desires change, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't want to do those things. Like your taste buds change, like I've always been told that as a kid. When you get older, your taste is going to change. Then you like, then you like wine or you like this or that. Yeah. But my taste buds have been changing, as I've been maturing in my walk with Christ. Like I don't want to go out. I actually went out to the bar the other night. You know how awkward I felt sitting at that bar, especially by myself. And the song came on when I left was "I'm Going Straight to Hell." You remember that song? I'm going straight to hell. And I was like, all right, that's it. I got to get out of here. Like your whole demeanor changes. But I always thought that it was a group and that was like their thing. And I always kind of felt dirty, right? Like that shame you're talking about. That's kind of what kept me away from even wanting to enter a church. Is that shame, like I thought I had to be clean, to come to God. But somebody told me, it's like, you don't clean up to take a shower, right? You go take a shower.
I literally was sitting here thinking about that's one of my, that was one of the things, like all these sayings, all these stories I've heard, but before my point is 8 months ago when I went through my, when I came out of the police academy and went through my divorce and all that. And then like everything's been changing since then. Is exactly what you said. You don't take you go to God to get clean. You don't get clean and then go to God. Yeah. For 35 years of my life, I had the view of you got to get clean before you go to God. And then if you get dirty again, you got to go try and hide until you can clean yourself up, and then you can go back to God. Because I had such a view of if I made a mistake, I needed to be punished. Like my prayer life before would be like, okay, God, I screwed that up. Don't know what you're going to do to me to punish me, but I'll take it on the chin. Whatever it is, I deserve it. If something bad happened in my life, my immediate reaction was to look at that situation and say, okay, what did I do wrong to deserve that? What's God punishing me for? Right. Everything was based off of punishment. And until I've gone through everything and ran back to God and completely have a new view and actually understand the word grace, like I said, I used to say either be a Christian or be a sinner. Now I know the whole point of being a Christian is that you are a sinner.
Come on.
And every day you sin, it is our human nature. We have this scale of sin. Yeah. The Bible teaches all sin's the same. Yes, there are certain ones that Christ detests, and you can go down that rabbit hole. But essentially, being a Christian being a true Christian is someone who has realized they're sinful, has accepted it, and realizes there ain't a thing we can do about it to correct it, you can correct it, but to forgive it. That is only the blood of Christ. That's and right. I grew up my whole life knowing that Jesus Christ is the only person that ever walked this earth that was sinless. But it wasn't until the past 8 months that I truly grasped and understand that the reason he is the only one that walked this earth and was sinless, because he had to be the perfect sacrifice for us, because none of us are capable of doing that. He felt every temptation. He battled every sin that we battle. And that's why he was the perfect sacrifice. And man, when that, I remember when that finally light bulb went off, it was an emotional moment, because it was like, wow. And it was also like I had to catch myself, because then I still do. I'm like, man, why couldn't I have grasped that 15 years ago, when I was 21? Yeah. What would my life be like? But at the same time, we wouldn't be sitting here on this podcast either. So, that's where free will comes into play. Some people say, yeah, Christ knows everything we're going to do before we do it. However, God does not have a script written for Thomas Avery's life or Jeremy Rath's life that this is exactly what we're going to do when we're 35, what we're going to do when we're 40,
Right.
so on and so forth.
I heard it explained like this, and it really took root, pun intended, I guess. That it's like a farmer planting a tree, right? God plants us into this world. When you plant a tree, you know you planted an apple tree, right? You don't know what branches are going to come up, where they're going to come up at, exactly. But you know that this tree is going to have branches, it's going to have leaves, right?
Yeah.
I don't. The comparison between that really struck me, like as if each leaf was, a day in our life. God isn't sitting there saying, X, Y, and Z is supposed to happen exactly how I play it out. He gives us these choices, right? He gives us our wiggle room to mess up or not, right? And you're talking about that grace. I think it's so important to realize that grace, because moments like that can be those points where people turn from God and they never come back,
100%.
And that shame is what fuels that. For me, for the longest time, that shame is what kept me from him. And that feeling that I can't be forgiven, right?
Yeah.
Like I knew better. Like I know better than God. Like I've messed up too much. You don't need to forgive me. But that grace is unending, right? I heard a good acronym. Grace is God's righteousness at Christ's expense, right? And what you said, that blood of Christ, like he's already paid for it. Like it's already been. Imagine going to a restaurant, right? And you eat dinner and you realize that someone has paid your tab, but you go to the waitress and you're like, no. I ate 4 steaks and I need to pay. You're like, no, it's been paid for. You're like, no, you don't understand. Like how ridiculous would that be? It's been paid for,
Yep.
but letting that go, that is the key. That's one of the hardest things I found in myself to do is that, I've been forgiven, but have I forgiven myself? Right?
Yeah.
And that's such a huge hurdle. I know a lot of people battle with that, and they can be those moments, those times that we have to remember to turn to him, lay it at his feet. It's already been paid for. Let it go. That's so hard to do.
And the big thing that I've grasped now is that it's our sinful nature, our human nature, that we cannot fathom the love of God. The closest thing that we can relate to it is if you have children, obviously, because it don't matter how many things my little boy does wrong, he's perfect.
Yeah, it's your boy.
There's no change. He's perfect. My little girl is perfect. It don't matter how much they aggravate me and frustrate me. They're perfect, and they always will be. I can look at my father, all the hell that I put my parents through. They'll do anything for me. Their love is the closest thing that I can see to Christ. But again, I used to pray, man. I would sit there and literally go to God and be like, okay, I know I've asked forgiveness for this like 4 or 5 times. I don't expect you to forgive me anymore. I don't deserve for you to forgive me anymore. I had the concept, right? Because I didn't deserve it, but I could not grasp and fathom that he could forgive me infinitely. And like that's the part when if you're struggling with addiction, if you're struggling with whatever habitual sin that you're dealing with, it can be so many things. The big ones that, people see is like, your big crimes, and then like your addictions are your sex addicts, or your pornography, people who struggle with pornography, are your drunk, stuff like that. People in the church that are dealing with pride, it's just as bad.
Mm-hmm.
Judgment, greed, all these things. It doesn't matter what your habitual sin is. If you can ever get to the point where you grasp and understand that it is infinite how many times Christ will forgive you. Now, that is not a green light to,
Oh, I've been forgiven.
Smoke meth every day for the next 15 years and ask forgiveness at the end of the day. Let's be clear, we're not condoning that. But, I have my habitual sins that it's like every freaking day, man. I have to go and be like, all right, God, I'm sorry. I know sanctification is a lifelong process now, and we're going to keep working on this. You
That's
know,
right.
I have a few things that I'm like, God's so busy working on these that I think they're on the to-do list. We're going to get to them later. But when I grasped that and I really, really accepted that I can be forgiven unlimited. And my goal now in this life is to be more Christ-like. Okay, so for me to be more Christ-like, I also have to give that grace to those around me. That's when I developed empathy for really the first time in my life. You know, I've taught some about it, the callousness I had, some of that coming from my careers and different stuff like that. Now I look at people so much different. I help people more because now I see like, yeah, man, they're in a bad spot. They ought not be doing that. But look at their situation. Look at their life. Look at look at their internal trouble. Look at their internal family systems, their perspective. What are they going through that's causing them to do this? I'm going to show the same grace and empathy that God shows me because my goal now is to be more Christ-like. I screw it up every day, though. Trust me.
That's right. I think we all do.
But that's what allowed me to be willing to start this, to come on here, to talk about it, to be vulnerable, to help other people, is because I finally understood that I can be forgiven. So why, if I'm down here with all the things I do wrong, who in the world am I to sit here and try and hold the people around me to this standard that is unachievable? And it talks about in that book, you know, that is the problem when you're judging people so much, you're holding people and you're holding yourself to a standard that is unachievable. And it puts you in a constant cycle of torture because you're just constantly trying to achieve this level of self that is completely unattainable. And you're also projecting that on all the people around you. You know, like I said, different people, friends, family members, in my marriage, while a lot of things that happen are unexcusable and not my fault, I did hold my wife to an unattainable standard at times because I was holding myself to it. And like I said, that, and I've heard on y'all's Misguidance podcast, Morgan talk about this, and she and I have talked about it directly, is she told me something the other day that was awesome. And I'm going to screw it up. So Morgan, I'm sorry. But it was something around the lines of when you can quit, or when you can start understanding that people's action towards you are not a reflection of yourself and what the person you are, you free yourself from judgment.
That's powerful.
And she and I talked about it a lot, like, and then it just so happened after she and I talked about it, it came up in this book. And that was, like he said, I sat there in my car. I was on the side of 49, like 2 a.m. when I was tackling that. And I was like, man, that is freeing. Because, dude, I'll have somebody like just in passing, or, you know, I'll make a simple little error, and I will create in my mind this scenario where this person just thinks I'm the scum of the earth off of one little mistake.
Yeah.
And you know, the same thing, things I did wrong in my marriage is not a reflection of who my wife was. Things she did to me is not a reflection of the man I am. And when you can get to that point where you start accepting that and understanding that with people, you free yourself. And that's what I'm working on, is freeing myself from the bondage of taking other people's action towards me and formulating the view of who I am. When the only view of who I am that matters is how God views me. And as I've tackled that, and it's a process I'm still in, that's where I started really experiencing some freedom from that judgment and that shame and that bondage of just constantly beating myself up. So,
Well, I'm curious to go back to what you're talking about with therapy. What does a day in your life look like? Like, versus from before therapy,
Whew.
Now. Like, what does that look like? How's it changed?
Death, murder, murder, happy, happy, happy.
What does a day look like? So before everything to now. Before everything. So obviously, before going to the academy and then the divorce, obviously married. So it was a lot of waking up, go to work, unhappy, unsure of myself, miserable, beating myself up, kind of like we've been talking about all day. Trying to tackle everything myself in my own power, in my own strength, in my own understanding. And so just this constant wrestle, this constant struggle against myself. If I was dealing with, back then I was building houses, and then when I was at the PD for a little while before the divorce, no grace, no empathy, very dominant, authoritative figure, in the aspect of it's my way or the highway. I would cuss you out so quick, and man, I'm good at it. I can cuss you up one side and down the other, and that's kind of how I would handle things. If someone had a problem with something, it was going to be my way. And if cussing you out didn't work, then I was dealing with subcontractors and criminals. If you wanted to go down a different route, we can go down that route. Get home, I would be so exhausted mentally. It was like I wasn't at home. Go in, eat dinner, try to play with the kids a little bit, and then I was gonna have a drink. I was gonna get me a drink. I was gonna go sit on the back porch. I was gonna think about all the ways I hated myself. I was gonna think about all the ways I wished I was dead. You say, what did a day before look like? A lot of riding around wishing something would happen to me. I was absent in my family's life. Had so much on me that I was trying to figure out, and I was trying to do it all in my own power. I didn't go to my dad for advice, who's one of the smartest, most level-headed guys. I didn't go to any friends for advice. I didn't go to any pastors. I didn't go to a therapist. I wouldn't talk to anybody and ask for help. And I dang sure wasn't going to go to God for help. Because at that time, my viewpoint was, I'm not good enough for him to help me. Now, what does today look like? Aside from, we can have fun and go into the day-to-day of what the world looks like for me with my crazy schedule. But, now, wake up, hit the ground, much more positive, asking God to help me through my day, moment by moment by moment by moment. Work, I'm much slower now in that I'm not in as much of a rush. I'm not looking for the next fight as much. I'm not out there wearing people out. I'm almost at the point where I subconsciously am constantly looking for the moment to help somebody, which has been really cool. It starts opening up opportunities, and I've had 3 or 4 in the last week that were pretty cool, that I got to do some stuff to help somebody. So I'm approaching my days with appreciation and with moment by moment asking God to help me. A lot more reading, a lot more meditating, a lot more prayer. now obviously divorced. I do have my children every other week, have 50-50 custody of them. When I do have them, it's still a battle because I'm still going through a lot of stuff, but try to be very present with them. I'm more gentle with them in the fact of not physically, but emotionally, like I said, now that I'm understanding that love and that grace from God, I'm able to show that more with even them. And so I'm just trying to enjoy them more. If I'm out with friends now, try to be very present with them. Obviously, try to avoid alcohol. I slipped. I drank this past week. I had to tackle an assignment for therapy that honestly, I could not access the emotions without alcohol. And I slipped, and I did drink this past week. I had to write a letter to people who have hurt me. And I have pushed those emotions so far down inside of me that I could not access them to write that letter. I could not allow myself to access those memories. So other than that day, stay away from any kind of substances or anything like that. I feel like I just rambled a lot. So did that kind of answer?
Perfect, man. That was perfect. Yeah, that's exactly what I was asking about.
Yeah.
What does it look like for your civilian carry or your off-duty carry?
Oh, we're getting into fun stuff now.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm kind of a gear junkie. I'm super hyper vigilant, always trying to think about scenarios. So for me, I always have a gun on me. It's sitting over here to the left at the moment. But so off-duty everyday carry for me is obviously a gun. For me, that's a Shadow Systems CR920. Always have my badge on my belt. Let's see what all I have. Always going to have a pocket knife. I'm big Benchmade fan. I also carry this little gadget. So it's a pry bar so that you don't end up using your pocket knife. It's also got some little screwdrivers in it that you can attach. They're small. So you can tighten bolts. You can do a lot of stuff. So stuff you don't want to use your knife for. This is a very random question, but I like it. I'm a big minimalist wallet. I don't carry cash on me 9 times out of 10. So just very simple there. What else? When I do carry cash, I'll have a little bit back there. My belts that I wear are Nex belts. And then I have different firearms for different scenarios. So also my like what I keep on me changes. If I'm going to a sporting event, if I'm going to something where it's crowded, where like you're essentially where your opportunity for an active shooter type situation could be amplified, I may have a tourniquet in my boot. I may have I'll probably carry extra mag on me. I may bump up and carry a larger gun, like my Shadow Systems MR920 or one of my Glocks. If I'm civilian clothes but in my patrol car, like I'm going to work or I'm going to a school or anything, then I'll have a larger weapon on me. Once you get to my truck, there's a slew of stuff. Medical, there's more guns and ammo probably in my truck, maybe, for a different situation. But medical, obviously I got kids, so like one of my cherished things I haven't had to use yet, but is awesome if you don't have them. I have these called life vacs. I have them in my patrol car, I have them in my truck, I have them in my apartment, parents' house. It's like a suction device for if somebody's choking. So just try to be very aware of all that kind of stuff. So,
I've seen those videos online.
Yeah.
Where they suck the food out of the kid's mouth.
Yep.
The last second.
Yeah. So
yeah,
that was a random good way to end, but I like it. So
yeah, it was good talk, man. I needed to hear a lot of that. I'm definitely going to be in contact about getting, what do you call that, internal family?
Oh, just go to therapy. They'll tell you all about it.
I'll be like, hey, yeah, I know all your tricks.
Yeah, you'll learn a lot. So, look, I hope everybody enjoyed it. I do want to add something real quick. Look, one of the things about SaveOne as we're starting this and as we're trying to grow this, we could really use some support financially. That's something that I really hesitated. It was a big step for me to even put that out there. But for us to put these videos out is not free. We're also working right now with someone who's building us a website that we're going to have some merchandise on that'll be able to help us out. But, you know, the big goal of this SaveOne venture was to do a podcast to help people, but also to be able to help people in a way of send them to therapy if they can't afford it, send them to rehab if they can't afford it. So I have recently started a GoFundMe for SaveOne. I also would love if any business owners are interested in sponsoring episodes of SaveOne. We'll have your logo up. You'll be talked about. Please get with me. We would love to do that. And then if anyone just wants to make that general donation, you can do it through GoFundMe. You can get with me or Thomas individually and make that donation. We would really appreciate everyone's help to keep growing this and keep reaching more people. And right now, other than liking and sharing our videos, which is very important, subscribing to our social medias, hit all those buttons. But if you pray about it and you feel God leading you to support us financially so that we can continue to grow this, we would really, really appreciate that. So can't wait to talk to y'all next week. Hope y'all have a wonderful week. Time to go to work.
Let's go.